Hey guys, we're here in Whelan Cameras today with Michael O'Sullivan, photographer. So commercial, corporate, events, weddings, is there anything you don't do, Michael?
Commercial, corporate, fashion, editorial, press, PR, events, weddings, and like most photographers nowadays, whatever comes up we consider it.
Okay, what gets your juices flowing, like when it comes to that kind of a shoot?
Look, you know yourself, like every shoot presents its challenges. They're the kind of shoots that you've planned and you get to conceive, and you get to, people are putting everything in your hands and they're trusting you to come up with a concept in a shoot, and it's great to be involved in that at that level. But obviously the vast majority of shoots for, especially corporate or commercial purposes, and especially say more at the product or style end of things like product or fashion or things like that, often you're the last person involved.
Okay. Yeah,
So like the whole team is there, the concept is there, and it's often a bit late for you to give the advice as to picking a location or picking
Sure.
certain things that would give them the best look that they want, because unfortunately the shoot is often planned by people who are not photographers.
Yes.
So then the challenge in those kind of shoots is it's a different kind of creativity, and that's fantastic as well, because you're overcoming.
You're given a brief and you have to fit into it.
Yeah, and often you're given a brief, but the rules are set up in opposition.
Okay.
Which is a challenge in itself. Sometimes it means a conversation, and sometimes it's just being really, really clever and thinking on your feet. And that's not everybody would enjoy that kind of thing. It can be stressful, but I love it.
Okay. So the purpose of this video, we're going to come back to that later on, but the purpose of this video, we're going to talk about what's in your hand, the camera. So the both of us shoot with a 5D Mark III, but you've had some experience with a 5D Mark IV. What have you found as the differences? And which one would you say excels, and where does one excel over the other?
For me, the things I look for in a camera, like at this stage, any of the high-end EOS bodies, they're amazing cameras. They are absolutely fantastic cameras when I think back to what we started on, back in the day. But there are still things you'd always look at, because when you outgrow a camera, or when you get to the point where you're constantly pushing a camera to its limits, you're shooting a corporate event or a commercial event and you're in the dark, for example, and you're always just trying to squeeze the extra bit of performance out of the autofocus system or out of the low light image quality performance or whatever it is, it's nice when a camera comes along then and the next one gives you that little bit extra.
Yeah.
For me, that's the autofocus in the 5D Mark IV.
Okay.
It's the difference between, in certain circumstances, getting a shot or not getting a shot.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that because I shoot with a 5DSR or a 5D3 or whatever, like say, it doesn't mean that with the 5D Mark III, you're suddenly going to stop getting all your shots.
Yeah.
But if I get that extra 10% or that extra 1% or whatever it is, that could be the difference between a killer shot or not. But it also allows me to shoot in circumstances that I'd be probably previously less comfortable to shoot.
Okay.
Like, I've shot in situations where there were corporate events and there was no lighting and you were practically in near dark. And when I was testing at one event, I was testing the 5D Mark IV. I couldn't believe at how I could push the autofocus to react quickly, whether I was shooting in live view or I was shooting in normally through the viewfinder. I couldn't believe that it was reacting so quickly in lighting situations that any camera would struggle in my previous experience. So it's that to me is what makes the 5D. The extra 6 megapixels, fantastic. If I want pixels, I have the 5DSR.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think as an all-rounder, 30 megapixels is also a good number.
It is, because it's not too big, it's not too many.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not too small. But the autofocus system on it is what, and the sensitivity, and just, there are a few other things as well. Throughout the functions of the camera, there are little tweaks here and there that have improved, and I think they all add up to just allowing you to do things with a camera that you might previously have thought twice.
Sure. So like as you were telling me previously as well, that if you have a Mark II, the Mark IV is definitely the jump up.
Absolutely.
So like if you have a Mark III, maybe the Mark IV, not right now, maybe in a little while longer.
Like for me, it's a no-brainer. It's all a matter of obviously, justifying the cost of things for me at the moment. So like the 5D3 is still a fantastic camera, but for me it's a no-brainer. At some point, probably not too far away, the next thing I'm adding to the kit is a 5D4. From a 5D2 up, it's night and day.
Okay.
Anybody on a 5D Mark II, like the jump in autofocus, the big thing for me from the 5D2 to the 5D, like if you were shooting landscapes and you're shooting all these, things where you don't really need to rely on, split second sensitivity in the camera to get the shot, right? Then fine, 5D2 is an amazing camera, and that whole range, that whole line from the original 5D were amazing cameras. I mean, they shook up the 1 series range, and the 1 series took another jump, but the autofocus jump
really came in as well, wasn't it? Like when the 60s came out, they kind of replaced the Mark II, really, kind of. Like it's something I always kind of say to people, that when people have the 5D Mark II in mind, that when the 6D came out, like the 6D Mark I, it was the same price as the Mark II was when it was new.
Yeah.
And then when the Mark III came out, it was a lot more expensive. So it was almost as if they'd pushed the 5D range closer up to the 1.
The 5D range now is like, I hate using terms like a professional camera and not professional. On any camera that's capable of taking decent pictures, if you're good at using it, you get top quality results, right? Sure. Let's be honest. But there are certain cameras that give you that, what I said a while ago, that extra little bit of flexibility, comfort, and security, right? It's stressful enough having, to cover events where, like I said, the rules could be set up in opposition or shoots you're doing or whatever. So anything a camera can do to give you that extra inch is great. But the 5D series took a massive leap with the 5D3, and I think I think it's now closed. It's now closed the gap on things we would have expected with the 1 series to a large extent. I mean, the 1 series has taken another step forward. That's the way Canon are doing it. It's like the tiers are moving up. So the 60 is like what the original 5D series was. It's an entry level, full frame with amazing image quality, etc., etc. And everybody will have their subjective opinion as to what you can or can't do with the files, but that's another thing entirely. Shoot properly and they're amazing files, okay? But the 5D is almost slotting in, taking over a lot of what we used to rely on from the 1 series. And the 1 series, like the 1DX, is obviously an incredible camera. But for me, the 5D Mark IV is the best all-round camera on the market. And having tested it and used it at a few events, it is going to end up in my bag. There's no two ways about it. I will be buying one.
So there's only kind of one other thing that I kind of miss from my Mark III, that I've recently bought a 200D, which I've mentioned in other videos, to be my bit of fun. The thing that I want to take around.
Yeah.
What I haven't had that I don't have in the 5D is the Wi-Fi. And now that I don't have it in my 5D, when I want to share images, like I do a wedding,
straight
and
to Facebook and this kind of stuff.
I send out a laptop, I upload it to Google Drive, wait for it to sync up, open Google Drive with the phone, save it back down. The process could take an hour depending on my connectivity. But with my 200D, boom, up straight away. Straight on the phone, straight on Instagram. And it kind of, if I'm doing an event, it can add a lovely level to the wedding and stuff, that you have a photo of the wedding up that people can see straight away in the day. That's in this, but it's also, the Wi-Fi is a bit more advanced obviously in these guys than being kind of more towards the entry level. So tell me what you found with
I haven't used the Wi-Fi too much. I've played around with it, and that whole idea of while you're even at an event or you're shooting an event for somebody, or what I think, to be honest, is kind of great, is if you could get images out anywhere and have a gallery up and keep the client further away from over your shoulder if you're even in a studio shoot.
Yes.
I'm not so sure about the tethering side, but I haven't tried that yet. I'm not so sure how that will work, how fast it'll be, whatever. I mean, I'm a raw shooter. But the whole idea of being able to pick an image and get it out there and get it published somewhere,
Yes.
That's something that's attracting me. And even though I haven't used that up to now, because I don't shoot primarily with this, like I said, I've used it I've used them on a few occasions for a few events and things like that. But it's kind of one of those things that I know that it'll probably end up becoming integrated into my workflow. It'll make things so much faster that I'll end up relying on it, and that's not a bad thing.
Because remember when it came out first, Shane from Canon had come down with it, and he was discussing a few of these features, and he was telling us about the Wi-Fi, and we're like, oh, have Canon just gone now? Like, whereas before they were filtering stuff down, or they're now bringing stuff up from the bottom. But he told us a little story about a guy who had been shooting.
I think they've always done a little bit of that, though.
They've done
I'll tell you why in a second.
They've
like as a person who switched to digital I had done digital shoots before. I was using gear that wasn't mine when I needed to, but I kind of clung to film. I was shooting medium format and image quality. It was a big deal for me at the time. But when the 1DS Mark III came out, to get 21 megapixels, you had to go and drop 10 grand in the shop. Yes. And then Then they brought out the 5D Mark II afterwards, and yeah, the autofocus was a trade-off that was too much for me, even though I had one as a backup. But they brought up the big thing that separated that was like the 21 megapixels. Then they brought that out, and the ISO was a stop better as well, you know. And then it's the same with various other cameras, like they brought in the Wi-Fi on lower generation cameras before, like the 1DX had, you know, there are things coming out on cameras now that the 1DX won't have.
Yes.
And I think, you know, they've always built the sensor tech up here, and then kind of they seem to do the whole other features from down here.
Upwards,
and I don't know, is that deliberately growing the people who are used to other kind of things into the SLR market? But I don't know.
It's a clever way to do it.
Yeah. But they've always done a little bit of it. Like you could have the top range camera, and then 6 months later, a new tech comes out. A new tech's going to go into new cameras. That's just what it is.
Yeah, that's so true. But what was really interesting was that what he'd said was that they'd given a pre-production model to a photographer from Boston, who was covering the Rosa Tralee Festival, not this year, but last year. And
is the 5D Mark IV?
Mark IV, yeah. And basically Shane was telling me how the guy was taking pictures of the festival, and they were landing on the desk of the Boston newspaper immediately, because he was using his phone as a hotspot. The photos were going from the camera to the phone straight to a server in Boston before he had a chance to look at the back of the camera. So other than being a gimmicky thing, this could potentially improve workflow for event photographers as well.
When I was testing it, one thing I will say is I grew up in the era of shooting film, right? I did a hell of a lot of stuff on slide film, and you know that to shoot on slide film. The one thing I'll say is I've always, you know, I have that kind of breeding, you know, I'd be one of the photographers who takes control of the exposure. Like most photographers out there would be the same, but you know, we're bred on taking control of the exposure. We don't care what the camera thinks. We'll always override this, that, and the other. I will say one thing I found when I was testing this afterwards, but originally when I was testing the 1DX, the new 1DX and this, there was a bit of time in between them. When I finally got my hands on them, it's very difficult to fool the exposure meter. It was nailing things spot on in situations where you'd be tempted to override, you know, almost the habit is built in that you're tempted to override the meter, and in certain situations, contrasty situations, backlight situations, you need to do that less.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. I like to be the kind of person who's in control. I don't like a computerized object making decisions for me, but at the same time, the priority for me is to think about the picture.
Yes.
And I want to think about pictures. I'm getting more and more getting aligned with the idea of, do you know what, the more mathematical stuff that I don't have to take control over, the better. And in situations like that with the Rosa Tralee and the guy uploading the images immediately, you need to make sure you can trust your cameras for that kind of crack, because you don't have a high hit rate and little correction, and there's always some correction. But if you get a higher percentage of images that can just go straight out as JPEG, happy days. That's an edge.
It is, you know. Okay, so you probably answered it halfway through it. Will you be buying one?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ideally 2.
Yes.
Okay. But to be honest with you, I do still feel until I get used to the Wi-Fi maybe, or get addicted to the Wi-Fi maybe.
Yeah.
The 5D3 will still be an amazing second camera. Like there's nothing wrong with the 5D3. It's a killer camera, amazing camera. But I'd like to be in a situation where at the moment I'm shooting with the 5D3 and the 5DSR. Switching the 5DSR up and down from full raw for set piece images that might be big prints and whatnot to any coverage I'm doing would be, you know, I'd be down to medium raw, which is still 28 megs, which is plenty. But you know, you don't want to have to constantly thinking about resizing your raw files. The best thing is to be able to have, this is the camera that I'm shooting for this, and that's the camera I'm shooting for that. The 5DSR will still stay there obviously for all the studio stuff and any creative stuff, but for events and general purpose, a 5D4 and a 5D3 is backup. That's pretty much the ideal setup for me.
So that's brilliant. Thanks a million, Michael.
Thanks
for coming. Thanks for having the chat. If you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe, like, follow. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.